The massive ship appeared without warning above Earth's orbit. It was so large that it blocked out the stars behind it, casting a shadow across 3 continents. Within minutes, every telescope, every satellite, every radar station on the planet was focused on the alien vessel. It hung there like a dark moon, silent and terrible. Admiral Sarah Kovac stood on the bridge of the UDS Defiance, humanity's largest warship, and felt her stomach turn to ice. She had been a soldier for 30 years. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion, survived the Jupiter Station bombing, and commanded fleets in a dozen smaller conflicts. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. The alien ship was 10 times the size of anything humanity had ever built, and it was not alone. As she watched, more ships materialized from the darkness of space. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. They formed a perfect sphere around Earth, each vessel bristling with weapons that humanity had no names for. The display screen on her bridge showed the energy readings from just one of those ships. It was enough to crack a planet in half. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," her communications officer said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook as they moved across the controls. "Put it through," Kovac said. The main screen flickered. The image that appeared made several of her crew members gasp. The alien was tall, perhaps 9 feet, with skin that seemed to shift between silver and black. Its eyes were golden and cold, with vertical pupils like a cat's. When it spoke, the translation software rendered its words in flat, emotionless English. "I am Warlord Thexazan of the Zentharian hegemony. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into our empire. You will surrender all military assets within 72 hours. You will dismantle all weapons. You will submit to hegemony law. Resistance is extinction. You have 3 days to choose." The screen went black. For a moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Then, all at once, everyone began talking. Kovac raised her hand for silence. "Get me a direct line to Geneva," she said. "And someone get me a damage assessment. I want to know exactly what we're facing." The numbers came back within an hour, and they were worse than Kovac had feared. The alien fleet consisted of over 2,000 vessels. Even the smallest were twice the size of Earth's largest battleship. Humanity's entire military force, spread across Earth, Mars, the Moon, and dozens of smaller stations, numbered less than 400 ships, and those ships had been built for fighting other humans, not for facing an enemy that could cross the galaxy. Kovac sat in the emergency council meeting, watching the world's leaders argue via holographic projection. The Chinese premier wanted to negotiate. The European president suggested immediate surrender. The North American Federation representative proposed a first strike. The arguments went in circles, getting louder and more desperate. "We can't fight them," someone said. "Look at those numbers. We'd be throwing away millions of lives for nothing. We can't just give up," someone else argued. "What kind of future would our children have as slaves?" Kovac listened to it all, feeling the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. She thought about her daughter, Emily, who had died on Mars when rebels had bombed a civilian transport. Emily had been 8 years old. Kovac had spent the last 15 years making sure that no one else would have to bury their children in a war. And now, this. "Admiral Kovac," the UN Secretary-General said, pulling her from her thoughts. "You've been quiet. What do you recommend?" Kovac looked at the faces around the table. All of them, waiting for her to offer some miracle solution. "I recommend we prepare for the worst," she said. "We should evacuate what civilians we can to the deep space stations. We should move our ships into defensive positions. And we should pray that these aliens are bluffing. And if they're not bluffing?" the Secretary-General asked. Kovac met his eyes. "Then we make them regret coming to our planet." The meeting ended without a decision. Kovac returned to her ship, feeling exhausted and angry. She was heading to her quarters when her personal communicator buzzed. The message was coded, flagged as urgent and classified at the highest level. She didn't recognize the sender. She opened it in her private office, behind 3 layers of security encryption. A man's face appeared on the screen. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and tired eyes. She recognized him immediately. Dr. James Chen, one of the leading scientists at the Deep Space Research Initiative. She had met him once, years ago, at a military technology conference. "Admiral Kovac," Chen said, "I apologize for the unusual contact method. What I'm about to tell you is classified above top secret. In fact, until today, only 17 people in the world knew about it." Kovac leaned forward. "I'm listening. 20 years ago, after we made first contact with the Proxima delegation, a small group of us became concerned," Chen said. "That first contact went badly, as you may remember. The Proximans were peaceful, but they warned us. They told us the galaxy was a dangerous place. They told us that humanity's isolation had been a gift, not a punishment, and that we should be very careful about announcing our presence." Kovac nodded. She remembered. The Proximans had visited for 3 days, shared some basic star charts, and then left. They had seemed almost afraid of something. "Some of us took that warning seriously," Chen continued. "We convinced certain members of the government to authorize a black project, a contingency plan in case humanity ever faced an existential threat from outside. We called it Project Midnight." "What kind of project?" Kovac asked. Chen's expression was grim. "We built a fleet, Admiral. A secret fleet. We built it in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Neptune, using automated shipyards and comet mining operations that officially don't exist. We've been building it for 20 years, using resources that were diverted from 100 different programs. Ships that were listed as lost in accidents. Personnel who officially died or retired. It's all been leading to this moment." Kovac felt her heart racing. "How many ships?" 3,000, give or take," Chen said. "They're smaller than standard military vessels. Faster. Equipped with experimental weapons and stealth technology that's decades ahead of anything in the official fleet. Every single person who crews those ships is a volunteer. They knew when they joined that they might never be acknowledged, that their families might never know what happened to them. They did it anyway, because they believed humanity needed a last line of defense." Kovac sat back in her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. 3,000 ships. A hidden army, waiting in the dark. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because the hegemony is here, and our time has come," Chen said. "I'm sending you the coordinates and command codes. The Midnight Armada is ready to deploy on your order. But Admiral, you need to understand something. These ships were designed for one purpose: asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run tactics, suicide strikes. Many of those crews won't be coming home. This isn't a fair fight. It's a knife fight in the dark, and we're going to make it as bloody as possible." Kovac thought about Emily. She thought about all the children who would grow up as slaves if Earth surrendered. She thought about the volunteers out there in the cold of the Kuiper Belt, waiting to give their lives for a chance at freedom. How soon can they be ready? "They're ready now," Chen said. "Say the word, and they'll start moving into position." "Do it," Kovac said. "And Dr. Chen, thank you." Chen's expression softened slightly. "My daughter is out there. Admiral. Captain Lisa Chen, commanding the strike carrier Phantom's Edge. When you give the order to attack, you'll be sending her into battle. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I'm asking you to do." The screen went dark. Kovac sat alone in her office for a long time, staring at the star chart that showed the alien fleet's positions. Then, she opened a new channel and began issuing orders. She didn't tell the Council about the Midnight Armada. Not yet. Some secrets needed to stay secret until the moment they mattered most. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. The hegemony sent 2 more messages, each one more threatening than the last. On the second day, they demonstrated their power. A beam of energy lanced down from one of their ships and struck the Simpson Desert in Australia. The sand turned to glass in an instant. When the satellite images came back, they showed a perfectly circular crater, 50 miles wide, with walls of black glass that gleamed in the sunlight. The world watched in horror. Riots broke out in major cities. Millions tried to flee, though there was nowhere to go. The evacuation transports were overloaded. Kovac heard reports of ships breaking apart during launch because too many people had forced their way aboard. On the third day, as the deadline approached, Kovac received a final transmission from the hegemony. Dexa Zan's face filled her screen again, those golden eyes looking almost bored. "Your time has expired," the warlord said. "We have detected no movement toward compliance. Therefore, we will begin the cleansing of your world. In 1 hour, we will begin bombardment of your population centers. You have failed your species." The transmission ended. Kovac stood and walked to the bridge. Her crew looked at her with expressions of fear and determination. They all knew what was coming. They all knew the odds. And they were all still at their stations. "Open a channel to all Earth forces," Kovac said. "And patch me through to Project Midnight." Her communications officer's eyes widened. Kovac took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Sarah Kovac to all defending forces. In approximately 55 minutes, the enemy will begin firing on Earth. They believe we are weak. They believe we will break easily. They have conquered 800 worlds using fear and overwhelming force. They think we're just another planet full of primitives who will roll over and die." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. "They're wrong. Humanity doesn't break. We bend. We adapt. We find ways to win against impossible odds. Today, we show them what it means to threaten Earth. Today, we show them that we don't bow to anyone." She entered the command codes Chen had given her. "Midnight Armada. This is Admiral Sarah Kovac. You are weapons free. Light them up for 3 seconds." Nothing happened. Then her sensor operator gasped. "Ma'am, I'm reading new contacts. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They're just appearing out of nowhere." The main screen showed what was happening. All around Earth, in a sphere stretching across 1,000,000 kilometers, ships were decloaking. They appeared like ghosts materializing from darkness, each one broadcasting a simple identifier. Midnight Actual, Midnight 2, Midnight 3, all the way up to Midnight 3000. Kovac smiled grimly. "All ships. This is Kovac. Hit them hard. Hit them fast. Make every shot count." The Midnight Armada surged forward, and the sky above Earth began to burn red with the fire of battle. 20 years earlier, Dr. James Chen had sat in a conference room, deep beneath Geneva, listening to a conversation that would change his life. The room had no windows, no cameras, and no recording devices. The 9 people at the table represented the most powerful governments on Earth, though officially, this meeting was not happening. "The Proximans have left," the UN Secretary-General said, her voice heavy with concern. And their final message was clear. "We are not alone in the galaxy, and most of our neighbors are not friendly." Chen had been at the Proxima First Contact site. He had seen the alien visitors, tall and graceful, with skin like burnished copper and eyes that held an ancient sadness. They had come in peace, shared basic scientific knowledge, and warned humanity about the dangers that lurked among the stars. Then they had left, and their final transmission still haunted him. "You are children playing in a forest full of wolves," the Proximan ambassador had said. "We cannot protect you. Our own people barely survive. Hide. Stay quiet. Pray the hegemony never finds you." "We cannot simply hide," the Chinese premier said at the conference table. "We've already announced our presence with radio signals. Our expansion into the solar system is accelerating. We cannot simply turn off our civilization. But we can prepare," said a woman Chen didn't recognize. She wore a military uniform with no insignia, and her eyes were hard. The Proximans gave us star charts. They showed us where the danger zones are. They also gave us something else, something they didn't explicitly state. They gave us time. If we're lucky, we have a generation before anyone notices us. Maybe two. What are you proposing? The Secretary General asked. The woman leaned forward. A black project. Completely off the books. We take the Proximan technology they shared. We push our own research to the absolute limit. And we build a backup plan. A hidden fleet. Something that can fight back if the worst happens. The arguments had gone on for hours. Some people called it paranoid. Others called it a waste of resources. But in the end, they had voted yes. Project Midnight was born. Chen had been chosen as the scientific director. He was young then, only 42, with a brilliant reputation and a security clearance that allowed him to know secrets that could start wars. He had thrown himself into the work with an intensity that destroyed his marriage and estranged him from his daughter, Lisa. The shipyards were built in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Neptune, where the sun was just another bright star. They used automated construction drones and mining ships that officially didn't exist. Every resource was carefully hidden in the budgets of 100 different programs. A mining colony listed as destroyed in an accident. A transport ship that supposedly suffered a reactor failure and was lost with all hands. Research grants that produced no published papers. Over the years, thousands of people joined the project. They came from every nation, every background. Some were soldiers who wanted to protect Earth. Some were scientists, fascinated by the challenge. Some were ordinary people who believed humanity needed guardians that no one knew about. Chen remembered interviewing the volunteers. Each one knew the truth. If they joined Midnight, they would disappear from official records. Their families would be told they had died or gone missing. They would spend years, possibly decades, living in secret bases in the outer solar system. And if the day came when they had to fight, there was a good chance they would not survive. Why would you accept these terms? Chen had asked a young pilot named Marcus Webb. Webb had smiled. Because someone has to, sir. Because if the monsters come and we're not ready, then everything ends. My kids, everyone's kids, they all die or become slaves. I can't let that happen. None of us can. They all said something similar. Every single volunteer. Chen had been humbled by their sacrifice. The ships they built were unlike anything in Earth's official fleet. They were smaller, faster, and designed with one philosophy: hurt the enemy more than they can hurt you, even if it kills you. The engineers called it asymmetric warfare design. Every ship was built to exploit the weaknesses of a larger, more powerful enemy. The stealth systems were revolutionary. They could bend electromagnetic radiation around the hull, making the ships nearly invisible to sensors. The weapons were a mix of conventional and experimental designs. Kinetic harpoons that could punch through shields with sheer velocity. Nuclear-pumped lasers that drew power from controlled fusion explosions. Swarm drones that could think and adapt like a school of predatory fish. But the most important feature was the crew. Every person on those ships had trained for years in tactics that official military academies would never teach. Ramming runs, false retreat maneuvers, sacrificial strikes where one ship would destroy itself to create an opening for others. They learned to fight without mercy, without hesitation, and without expecting to survive. Chen's daughter, Lisa, had been one of them. She had joined when she was 25, angry at her father for missing her childhood, determined to prove she was more than just the daughter of a scientist. Chen had tried to stop her, but Lisa had inherited his stubbornness. She had passed every test, aced every simulation, and earned command of a strike carrier called Phantom's Edge. The last time Chen had spoken to her in person was 5 years ago, at a hidden base on one of Neptune's moons. She had looked so much like her mother, with the same fierce intelligence in her eyes. "I know you think I'm doing this to spite you," Lisa had said. "But I'm not. I'm doing this because it matters. Because someone has to stand between Earth and the darkness. I'm afraid I'll lose you, Chen had admitted. Lisa had hugged him, something she hadn't done since she was a child. You already lost me, Dad. When you chose this project over our family. But maybe, if the worst happens, we can lose ourselves together, fighting for something that matters. Now, as Chen sat in his office watching the hegemony fleet surround Earth, he thought about that conversation. In a few hours, he would give Admiral Kovac the command codes. In a few hours, Lisa would go into battle against an enemy that had conquered 800 worlds. The odds were terrible. But Chen had faith in the crews of the Midnight Armada. They had been preparing for this their entire adult lives. His communicator buzzed. It was a message from one of the outer bases, text only. Sir? All ships report ready. Crews are at stations, awaiting the signal. Chen closed his eyes and said a prayer to a god he wasn't sure he believed in. Then he opened the secure channel to Admiral Kovac. While Chen was making contact with Kovac, 3,000 ships were moving into position in the darkness of space. They advanced in complete silence, their stealth systems active, invisible to the hegemony sensors. Each ship followed a precise flight path calculated by quantum computers that had been running battle simulations for 20 years. Captain Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of Phantom's Edge, watching her crew work with calm efficiency. Her ship was one of the largest in the Midnight Fleet, a strike carrier that held 40 smaller fighter craft. Each fighter was piloted by someone who had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be one way. Captain, we're in position, her tactical officer reported. All squadrons ready for launch on your mark. Lisa looked at the holographic display showing the hegemony fleet. They were arranged in a standard blockade formation, powerful but rigid. The enemy ships were massive and intimidating, but they were also predictable. They relied on overwhelming force and technological superiority. They had probably never faced an enemy that was willing to trade lives for tactical advantage. All crew, this is Captain Chen, she said over the ship-wide intercom. In approximately 20 minutes, we're going to decloak and attack. The enemy is larger, better armed, and more experienced than we are. They think they've already won. Our job is to prove them wrong. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Every person on this ship volunteered to be here. Every person on every midnight ship volunteered. We all knew what we were signing up for. We're not official military. We're not going to get medals or parades. If we die today, our names won't be on any memorial. Our families will never know what we did. The bridge was silent. Lisa could feel the weight of her words settling on her crew. But here's what they will know, she continued. They'll know that Earth survived. They'll know that humanity didn't bow. They'll know that when the monsters came, someone stood in their way and said, no further. That's what we're fighting for. Not glory. Not recognition. Just the simple right to exist. She looked at each member of her bridge crew. It has been my honor to serve with all of you. When the signal comes, we're going to hit them so hard they forget their own names. Understood? Thank you for watching. I see Nar. And Riqui now you can try to subscribe in some well. Yes, ma'am. The response came from every station. Loud and determined. Lisa smiled. She thought about her father. Somewhere far away on Earth. Probably sick with worry. She thought about the mother she barely remembered, who had left when the secrets became too much. She thought about all the years she had spent training for this moment. Engineering. Give me full power to weapons and engines, she ordered. Helm. Prepare evasive pattern. Delta 7. Tactical. Load all tubes with kinetic harpoons. Fighter squadrons. Prepare for immediate launch. The orders were acknowledged. The ship hummed with barely contained energy. Now we wait, Lisa said softly. Across the solar system, similar scenes were playing out on 3,000 ships. Captains giving final speeches. Crews checking weapons one last time. People making peace with the possibility that they might not see tomorrow. On a destroyer called Shadow's Fist, Commander Robert Okafor recorded a final message to his wife and children. The message would only be transmitted if he died. A final goodbye from a man who had officially been dead for 8 years. On a frigate named Silent Thunder, Lieutenant Amy Park led her crew in a moment of silence, each person thinking about whatever gave them the strength to keep going. On a small stealth ship called Ghost Whisper, a pilot named Jackson Torres, who had once been a commercial transport operator, sat alone in his cockpit and hummed an old song his grandmother had taught him. They were all different people, from different backgrounds, with different reasons for being there. But they shared one thing: the absolute conviction that Earth was worth dying for. Back on Earth, Admiral Kovac watched her sensors as the hegemony ships began to power up their weapons. The hour was almost up. Soon the bombardment would begin, and millions would die. Her hand hovered over the command console, ready to give the order. She thought about the 3,000 ships hiding in the dark, filled with people who had given up everything for this moment. She thought about the responsibility of sending them into battle. She thought about her daughter, Emily, and all the children who deserved a future. The hegemony sent their final message. Warlord Thex Zan's face appeared on the screen, cold and certain of victory. "Your time has expired," he said. Kovac entered the command codes. The universe held its breath. And then, all at once, 3,000 ships appeared from nowhere. Their weapons hot, their crews ready, and their purpose absolute. The Midnight Armada had arrived, and the sky began to burn. The moment the Midnight Armada decloaked, chaos erupted across the hegemony fleet. Warning alarms screamed on every enemy ship as sensors that had shown empty space suddenly registered thousands of contacts. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, Warlord Thex Zan stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "Impossible," he said. "Our scouts reported less than 400 military vessels in this entire system. Where did they come from?" His tactical officer's hands flew across the controls, trying to make sense of the data. "Sir, the signatures are all wrong. These ships are smaller than standard military craft, lower energy output. But there are so many of them." Thex Zan felt something he had not experienced in over a century of conquest. Uncertainty. In every previous campaign, the primitives had surrendered at the first show of force, or died quickly when they resisted. But this was different. These humans had hidden an entire fleet, and now that fleet was moving with coordinated precision that spoke of extensive training and planning. "All ships, Battle Formation 7, Thex Zan ordered. "Deploy shields to maximum. Prepare to—" He never finished the command. The human ships struck like a swarm of metal hornets. Captain Lisa Chen watched from the bridge of Phantom's Edge as her fighter squadrons launched into the void. 40 small craft streamed from her carrier's launch bays, each one no larger than a terrestrial bus, each one carrying enough firepower to cripple a ship 10 times its size. "All squadrons away," her tactical officer reported. "Attack pattern Omega is active." Lisa gripped the armrests of her command chair. "Helm, bring us in close. I want to be within harpoon range in 90 seconds. Engineering, divert all non-essential power to forward shields." Phantom's Edge accelerated toward the nearest hegemony cruiser, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. Around her ship, dozens of other midnight vessels were doing the same, each one targeting a different enemy. The first kinetic harpoons launched from the human fleet were simple weapons, at least in concept. They were solid metal rods, magnetically accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. No explosives, no fancy energy weapons, just mass and velocity. Physics did the rest. The harpoons hit the hegemony shields like hammers striking glass. The shields, designed to disperse energy weapons, couldn't handle the kinetic impact. They flickered and failed. The harpoons punched through armor and deep into the alien ships, creating massive pressure waves that tore through internal compartments. On Eternal Dominion, Thex Zan watched in horror as 3 of his destroyers simply broke apart, their hulls ripped open by weapons that cost almost nothing to build, but delivered devastating results. "Return fire!" he roared. "All batteries, open fire!" The hegemony fleet responded with a wall of energy. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and weapons that humanity had no names for, lashed out at the midnight armada. The difference in firepower was immediately obvious. When a hegemony weapon hit a human ship, that ship often exploded in a ball of superheated metal. But the humans kept coming. Commander Robert Okafor's destroyer, Shadow's Fist, took a direct hit from a plasma cannon. The entire port side of his ship melted away, killing 30 of his crew instantly. Alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space. "Seal the breaches!" Okafor shouted over the chaos. "Helm, maintain course. We're not done yet." "Sir." "We've lost main engines," his engineering officer reported. "We're venting plasma. Hull integrity at 40%. Okafor looked at his tactical display. His ship was dying, but they were close now. Very close to a hegemony battlecruiser. "All hands. This is the commander. Brace for impact. We're going to show these bastards what humans do when we're cornered." He activated the ship-wide intercom one last time. "It has been an honor serving with you all." Then he ordered the helmsman to ram. Shadow's Fist accelerated on maneuvering thrusters, closing the distance to the enemy battlecruiser in seconds. At the last moment, Okafor triggered the reactor overload. The ship's fusion core went critical, just as the destroyer struck the battlecruiser's hull. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief new star in the sky. When it faded, both ships were gone, along with everyone aboard them. But Okafor had traded one dying destroyer for a battlecruiser that had been worth 100 of his ship. In the brutal mathematics of asymmetric warfare, it was a victory. Across the battlefield, similar sacrifices were happening. Human captains, seeing their ships crippled beyond repair, made the decision to take enemies with them. It was a tactic the hegemony had never encountered. Their culture valued survival and victory. The idea of deliberately destroying yourself to hurt the enemy was alien to them, incomprehensible. But to humanity, it made perfect sense. Every midnight crew member had volunteered, knowing they might not return. Death was already factored into their plans. The only question was how many enemies they could take with them. Lieutenant Amy Park's frigate, Silent Thunder, dodged between two hegemony destroyers, her helmsman flying the ship with reckless skill. Park's tactical officer had identified a weakness in the enemy formation. A gap where their overlapping fields of fire didn't quite cover. "Launch drone swarms," Park ordered. "Target their sensor arrays." From Silent Thunder's hull, hatches opened and released thousands of small drones, each one about the size of a human fist. They weren't individually dangerous, but they moved with frightening coordination, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. The swarm split into multiple groups, each one targeting a different enemy ship. The drones attached themselves to sensor arrays, communications, dishes, and weapon targeting systems. Then they detonated, small explosions that did minimal damage individually but crippled the enemy's ability to see and fight effectively. "Enemy destroyers are blind," Park's tactical officer reported. "They're firing randomly." "Then let's not be random," Park said with a cold smile. "All weapons, fire at will." Silent Thunder's railguns opened up, pouring rounds into the confused destroyers. Without sensors, the enemy ships couldn't effectively return fire. They died slowly, taking hit after hit until their hulls ruptured and their atmosphere vented into space. On Earth, people watched the battle through satellite feeds and telescope images. The sky above was filled with light. Brief flashes as ships exploded and died. Plasma trails cut across the darkness. Debris from destroyed vessels created meteor showers as it fell toward the atmosphere. Dr. Chen watched from his office, his eyes fixed on a tactical display that showed the positions of every midnight ship. Green dots for active vessels, red for confirmed, destroyed, yellow for damaged. As he watched, Green dots kept turning red. The losses were staggering. In the first 10 minutes of combat, humanity had lost over 200 ships, but the hegemony had lost more. Their ships were larger and more powerful, but they were also easier targets, and the midnight tactics were taking a heavy toll. For every human ship destroyed, 2 or 3 enemy vessels died. Chen's hands clenched into fists as he watched a green dot labeled Phantom's Edge flicker yellow. Lisa's ship had taken damage. On Phantom's Edge, Lisa was thrown against her command chair as the ship shuddered from a near miss. Damage report. Hull, breach on deck 7, her engineering officer called out. We've lost 2 fighter bays. Casualties unknown. Can we still fight? Yes, ma'am. Main weapons are operational. Lisa pulled up the tactical display, ignoring the pain in her ribs where she had hit the chair. Her fighter squadrons were engaged with enemy interceptors. Swarms of small craft dancing and dying in the void. The main battle was chaos, ships from both sides moving at tremendous speeds, weapons fire creating a deadly web of light and energy. She noticed something on the display that made her heart race. The hegemony flagship, Eternal Dominion, was slightly out of position, separated from its support ships by a gap of perhaps 10 kilometers. It wasn't much, but it was an opening. Tactical. I need a firing solution on that flagship, Lisa ordered. All remaining fighters, form up for attack run Delta. We're going for the head of the snake. Her tactical officer looked uncertain. Ma'am, their flagship is heavily shielded. We'd need to concentrate fire from at least 20 ships to break through. Lisa smiled grimly. Then get me those 20 ships. Broadcast on midnight command frequency. All available vessels. This is Phantom's Edge. We have a shot at their flagship. Who's with me? The responses came back immediately. Ships that were damaged. Ships that were running low on ammunition. Ships that by all rights should have been retreating. All of them turned toward the flagship. We've got 34 ships responding, her communications officer said, surprise in her voice. They're all moving into position. Thex Zan watched in growing alarm as the human ships converged on his position. His tactical officer was shouting warnings, but Thex Zan was too stunned to process them. These primitives were attacking the flagship directly. It was suicidal. Insane. His shields could withstand anything they could throw at him. All support vessels, close formation. Thex Zan ordered. Destroy those ships before they get in range. But the support vessels were engaged with other human ships, and the midnight vessels were fast and maneuverable. They wove through the defensive fire like dancers, their pilots pushing their ships to the absolute limit. Lisa watched the range close. 5 kilometers. 4. 3. All ships, fire on my mark, she said. 34 ships fired simultaneously. Kinetic harpoons, nuclear-pumped lasers, conventional missiles, and weapons that were still experimental, all of it aimed at one point on the flagship's shields. The combined firepower was staggering. The shields held for 3 seconds. Then they collapsed. Half the weapons made it through, striking the flagship's armored hull. Explosions blossomed along Eternal Dominion's flanks. Atmosphere vented from ruptured compartments. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship as ammunition stores and fuel tanks detonated. On the flagship's bridge, Thex Zan was thrown from his command chair as the ship lurched. Emergency lights flickered on as main power failed. Around him, crew members screamed and died as consoles exploded and bulkheads collapsed. Damage report, Thex Zan shouted. Critical damage to decks 12 through 20. Someone responded through the smoke and chaos. We've lost main engines. Life support is failing in multiple sections. Sir, we need to evacuate. Thex Zan looked at the tactical display, though half of it was dead. The humans were regrouping for another strike. His support ships were trying to reach him, but they were too far away, engaged with too many enemies. For the first time in his long military career, Thex Zan understood that he might actually lose. Not just this battle, but his life. These humans were not primitives. They were warriors, and they were willing to die to win. Send a signal to the reserve fleet, Dex-san said, his voice hard. Tell them we need immediate reinforcements. And send a message to Hegemony Command. Tell them, Earth is not what we expected. The communication officer tried to comply, but then looked up in despair. Sir, our long-range communications are destroyed. We can't reach the reserve fleet. Dex-san closed his golden eyes. This was a disaster. But he was still alive. And the battle was not over. All ships, fall back to defensive formation. We will regroup. And another explosion rocked the flagship. On the view screen, Dex-san saw a small human ship, one of their fighters, accelerating directly toward the bridge. The pilot had to know it was a suicide run. Shoot it down, Dex-san ordered. The defensive turrets fired, but the human pilot was skilled and the fighter was fast. It dodged most of the fire, and what it couldn't dodge, it simply absorbed. The small craft was burning, pieces of it falling away, but it kept coming. At the last second, before the fighter impacted, Dex-san saw the pilot through the canopy. A human face, young and determined, mouth open in what might have been a battle cry or a scream of defiance. The fighter struck the bridge's armored view screen. The explosion was relatively small, but it was in exactly the right place. The view screen shattered. Atmosphere howled out into space. Dex-san grabbed a railing as crew members were sucked toward the breach. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, sealing off the bridge from the rest of the ship. Dex-san found himself in a small section with only 5 other crew members, all of them struggling into emergency suits. Outside, the battle continued to rage, and in the distance, Dex-san could see more human ships approaching, their weapons charged and ready. The sky continued to burn red, and Earth refused to bow. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when Admiral Kovac received the report she had been dreading. Her communications officer handed her the tablet with shaking hands, unable to meet her eyes. The numbers were brutal. Of the 3,000 ships in the Midnight Armada, only 800 were still combat effective. Another 400 were damaged but limping along, and the rest were simply gone, scattered as debris across millions of kilometers of space. The hegemony had lost even more ships in total numbers, but they had started with more, and their vessels were individually more powerful. Worse, the enemy was adapting. After the initial shock, the hegemony commanders had begun to adjust their tactics, spreading their formations to prevent the concentrated strikes that had crippled their flagship. They were also getting reinforcements. Long-range sensors had detected a massive energy signature at the edge of the solar system. How long until the reinforcements arrive? Kovac asked, though she already suspected the answer. 12 hours, ma'am, the sensor operator replied. And Admiral, this fleet is bigger than the first one. We're reading over 6,000 ships. Kovac felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. 12 hours. Until overwhelming force arrived. 800 functional ships to defend Earth against 6,000 fresh enemy vessels. The mathematics were simple and terrible. She opened a secure channel to Dr. Chen. His face appeared on her screen, older and more haggard than it had been just hours before. I saw the casualty reports, Chen said before Kovac could speak. Lisa's ship is still active, but she's lost half her fighters, and her engines are running at 60% capacity. I'm sorry, James, Kovac said. Chen shook his head. Don't be. She chose this. They all did. But Admiral, we need to talk about what happens next. We can't win against those reinforcements. Not with what we have left. I know, Kovac admitted. But we're not surrendering. If Earth is going to die, we'll die fighting. That's what I expected you to say, Chen replied with a tired smile. So let me tell you about Phase 2. Kovac leaned forward. Phase 2? The Midnight Armada was never meant to win alone, Chen explained. It was meant to buy time and show the hegemony that we're not helpless. Phase 2 is about total mobilization. Every ship in human space, military or civilian, gets armed. Every mining barge, every transport, every personal yacht. We turn the entire solar system into a weapon. Kovac thought about the millions of civilians who would die in such a plan. Then she thought about the billions who would die or be enslaved if Earth surrendered. How long would it take to implement? 1. It's already happening, Chen said. I gave the order 3 hours ago. The civilian fleet has been broadcasting instructions. Anyone who can fly is being given weapons, targeting coordinates, and basic tactical training. We won't have military precision, but we'll have numbers. How many ships are we talking about? Chen checked his data. Approximately 40,000 civilian vessels across the solar system. Most of them are unarmed transports, mining ships, and personal craft. But we're fitting them with whatever we can. Nuclear missiles from old defense satellites. Mining lasers recalibrated for combat. Some of them are just going to ram enemy ships at high speed. Kovac closed her eyes. 40,000 ships flown by civilians who had maybe a few hours of combat training. It would be a massacre. But it would also be the largest naval engagement in human history. And if even a fraction of those civilian ships managed to damage or destroy enemy vessels, it might make a difference. Do it, Kovac said. Mobilize everyone. If we're going to go down, we'll go down fighting so hard they'll remember it for 1,000 years. While Kovac and Chen were planning Phase 2, something unexpected was happening aboard the damaged Hegemony flagship. Thex Zazan had managed to reach a secondary command center, and from there, he had sent a message to his superiors at Hegemony Command, describing what he had encountered at Earth. The response came back faster than he expected. The holographic image of High Commander Vexis Thar appeared, her 4 arms crossed in a gesture of deep thought. She was older than Thex Zan by several centuries, with scars that told of battles fought when humans were still living in caves. You allowed primitives to damage your flagship, Vex Thar said, her voice dripping with contempt. You have brought shame to your lineage. Thex Zan forced himself to remain calm. High Commander, with respect, these are not ordinary primitives. They have technology we did not expect. They fight with a ferocity that defies logic. They deliberately sacrifice themselves to achieve tactical victories. Sacrifice is the action of the desperate, Vex Thar said dismissively. No, Thex Zan argued, surprising himself with his vehemence. It is the action of the determined. High Commander, I have fought in 300 campaigns. I have conquered species that begged for mercy, and species that fought with courage. But I have never encountered a species like this. Every human we kill seems to make the others fight harder. They don't break. They don't surrender. They just keep coming. Vex Thar was silent for a moment, considering his words. The reinforcement fleet will arrive in your location within 12 hours. You are ordered to hold position until then. Once they arrive, you will commence total extermination protocol. If these humans will not submit, they will be eliminated completely. The transmission ended. Thex Zan stood alone in the command center, looking at the damage reports scrolling across his screens. Total extermination protocol. It was the harshest response the hegemony had, reserved for species that posed an existential threat to the Empire. He thought about the human pilot who had deliberately crashed into his bridge. The determination in that young face. The absolute conviction that death was preferable to submission. For the first time, Thex Zan wondered if perhaps the hegemony had made a mistake coming to this system. On a mining station orbiting Ceres, a woman named Sarah Martinez listened to the broadcast with her 6-year-old son sitting beside her. The message was clear. All civilian ships were being called to fight. Anyone who could pilot a vessel was being asked to arm themselves and join the defense of Earth. Sarah had been a transport pilot before she retired to raise her son. Her husband had died in a mining accident 2 years ago. The small mining ship they owned was old, barely functional, and certainly not designed for combat. "Mommy, what's happening?" her son asked, Seeing the fear on her face, Sarah looked at him, at his innocent eyes and the future he deserved. Then she made her decision. Honey, we're going to go visit Aunt Maria on Mars. Right now. We need to pack quickly. But the message said, I know what the message said, Sarah interrupted gently. And there are going to be a lot of brave people who answer that call. But my job is to keep you safe. Someone else will fight. We're going to run. Bye. She wasn't the only one making that choice. Across the solar system, thousands of people chose to flee rather than fight. They took their ships and headed for the outer system, hoping to hide in the asteroid belt or beyond until the war was over. No one blamed them. Survival was a basic instinct, but tens of thousands more made the opposite choice. On a transport ship called Lucky Star, a cargo hauler named Jack Morrison welded missile launchers to his hull. He had no military training, just 40 years of experience flying between Earth and Mars. His crew consisted of his 2 adult children and his brother-in-law. This is probably going to get us killed, Jack said as he tested the missile systems. Probably, his daughter agreed. But at least we won't die wondering if we could have made a difference. On Jupiter's moon Europa, the entire mining colony voted to convert their drilling ships into improvised warships. They had mining lasers that could cut through kilometers of ice. Against enemy hull armor, those lasers might actually be effective weapons. The colony director, a man named Chen Wei, who had no relation to Dr. James Chen, broadcast a message to all the ships in the Jupiter system. We're miners, not soldiers. We're engineers and technicians and ordinary people. But this is our home. These aliens want to take it from us. So we're going to teach them something important about humanity. We don't give up. We don't give in. And we definitely don't go quietly. Similar scenes were playing out throughout human space. A luxury yacht owner armed his ship with every weapon he could buy or steal. A medical transport crew rigged their ship to carry nuclear warheads. A group of teenagers on Mars colony took over a decommissioned military shuttle and managed to get it flying again. Admiral Kovac watched the reports flooding in and felt tears sting her eyes. Humanity was rallying. Against impossible odds, with no chance of survival, billions of people were choosing to fight. But there was also treachery. A hegemony transmission was intercepted, and it revealed something that made Kovac's blood run cold. There were humans who were negotiating with the enemy. A group of corporate executives and politicians had secretly contacted the hegemony, offering to help facilitate Earth's surrender in exchange for privileged positions in the new order. Kovac had them arrested within an hour. There was no time for trials. The evidence was clear. She had them confined to a military prison and made sure the news was broadcast widely. The message was simple. Traitors would not be tolerated. Meanwhile, on the hegemony ships, something unexpected was happening. The Xantharians were not the only species in the hegemony fleet. There were dozens of other races, all of them conquered and forced into military service. They fought for the hegemony, not out of loyalty, but because refusal meant their home worlds would be destroyed. One of these species, the Krell, were small and insect-like, with multiple limbs and compound eyes. They had been conquered 200 years ago, and had served the hegemony faithfully ever since. But watching the humans fight had stirred something in the Krell crews. On a hegemony destroyer, a Krell engineer named Tikcha watched through the sensors as human ships threw themselves against impossible odds. He saw civilian transports, unarmed and helpless, trying to ram hegemony warships. He saw pilots staying with damaged ships, firing until their final moment rather than fleeing. Tikcha remembered when the hegemony had come to his world. His people had surrendered immediately, believing resistance was futile. They had survived, but at the cost of their freedom and dignity. Watching the humans, Tikcha felt something he had not felt in 2 centuries. Shame at his own cowardice and admiration for someone else's courage. He looked at his fellow Krell crew members. They were all watching the same displays, seeing the same thing. Slowly, Tikcha moved to his station and began entering commands. "What are you doing?" His supervisor, a Xantharian officer, demanded. Tikcha's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "I am remembering what it means to be free." He entered the final command. The destroyer's main weapons, which should have been firing at human ships, instead turned inward and fired on the hegemony battlecruiser next to them. The shots weren't enough to destroy the larger ship, but they caused significant damage and, more importantly, confusion. The Xantharian supervisor reached for his weapon, but other Krell crew members stopped him. The rebellion spread quickly. Within minutes, 3 hegemony ships in that sector were firing on each other as conquered species rose up against their oppressors. The rebellion was small and quickly crushed, but its effects rippled through the hegemony fleet. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had broken the hegemony's aura of invincibility. Kovac received the report about the Krell rebellion with grim satisfaction. "Broadcast that information on all channels," she ordered. "Let every species in that fleet know that humanity inspired someone to fight back. Let them know that the hegemony can be beaten." As the 12-hour countdown continued, both sides prepared for the final battle. The hegemony reinforcement fleet was coming, massive and unstoppable. The human defenders were exhausted, damaged, and outnumbered, but they were also determined, creative, and absolutely refusing to surrender. Dr. Chen sent one final message to the Midnight Armada and to all the civilian volunteers. "In a few hours, the biggest fleet in hegemony history is going to arrive in our system. They're coming to finish what they started, to crush us, to make an example of Earth so that no other species ever dares to resist them." He paused, choosing his words with care. "We're going to disappoint them. We're going to fight so hard, so fiercely, that centuries from now, species across the galaxy will tell stories about Earth, about the humans who refused to bow, about the planet that burned but never broke. This is our finest hour. This is the moment that defines us as a species. So when those ships arrive, we're going to meet them with everything we have. And we're going to show them something they've never seen before. A species that would rather die free than live in chains." The message ended. Across the solar system, 40,000 civilian ships and 800 Midnight Armada vessels prepared for battle. Above Earth, the sky continued to glow red from the debris of destroyed ships burning in the atmosphere. The countdown reached 0. At the edge of the solar system, space twisted and tore. The hegemony reinforcement fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, 6,000 ships, strong, weapons charged and ready. The final battle was about to begin. The hegemony reinforcement fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, like a spreading darkness. 6,000 warships, each one a floating fortress, arranged themselves in perfect military formation. At their center was the pride of Dominion, a dreadnought so massive that it generated its own gravitational field. On its bridge stood High Commander Vexthar herself, come to personally oversee the extermination of humanity. She looked at the tactical display showing the pitiful remnants of Earth's defense. 800 military vessels, most of them damaged, and behind them, scattered across millions of kilometers, was a cloud of civilian ships, so numerous they made the sensors glitch. 40,000 civilian craft, her tactical officer reported. Most of them are unarmed or equipped with improvised weapons. They pose no significant threat. Vexthar studied the display with her ancient eyes. She had seen many species fight for survival, but this was unique. These humans had armed cargo haulers, mining ships, and personal transports. They had sent their civilians into battle knowing most would die. "They're insane," she said quietly. "Brave, perhaps, but insane. No species sacrifices its non-combatants like this." "Should we offer terms one final time?" her second officer asked. "Perhaps seeing our full force will break their resolve." Vexthar considered this. Protocol suggested one final offer of surrender. But looking at the human fleet's disposition, at the way even their damaged ships held formation. She knew what the answer would be. No, she decided. They have made their choice. We will honor it by giving them the warrior's death they seek. All ships, prepare to advance. Total extermination protocol is authorized. The order rippled through the hegemony fleet. Weapons that could shatter continents powered up. Shields that could withstand nuclear fire activated. The fleet began moving forward, a slow and inexorable tide of destruction. On the bridge of UDS Defiance, Admiral Kovac watched them come. She had maybe 30 minutes before they entered effective weapons range. She opened a channel to all defending forces, both military and civilian. This is Admiral Sarah Kovac to all ships. In a few minutes, we're going to engage the largest military force ever assembled against humanity. We are outnumbered. We are outgunned. By every logical calculation, we should surrender or flee. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we're not going to do that. Because there are some things worth dying for. Freedom is one of them. The right to exist on our own terms is another. Our children's future is a third. Her voice grew stronger. Some of you are soldiers. Some are miners. Some are transport pilots who've never fired a weapon in your lives. But today, we're all warriors. Today, we all stand between Earth and annihilation. And today, we show the galaxy what it means to threaten humanity. She took a deep breath. All ships, assume attack formation. When they're in range, hit them with everything we have. Make every shot count. Make every sacrifice meaningful. And if we die today, we die knowing that we never, ever surrendered. The response was immediate. 40,000 voices, speaking 100 different languages, all saying the same thing in their own way. They were ready. They were afraid. But they would fight. Captain Lisa Chen, her ship Phantom's Edge limping along on damaged engines, gathered her remaining crew. They numbered only 80 now, down from the original complement of 200. Her ship was a wreck, held together by emergency patches and the skill of her engineering team. We're not going to make it through this one. Lisa told her crew honestly. Our shields are gone. Our weapons are at 30% capacity. One good hit, and we're done. She looked at their faces, these people who had given up everything to be here. But we can still make a difference. I'm setting a course directly for their flagship. We're going to get as close as possible, and we're going to hurt them. Anyone who wants to take an escape pod, now's the time. I won't think less of you. No one moved. Lisa smiled, feeling tears threaten to fall. Then let's go make my father proud. Helm, full speed toward that dreadnought. Engineering. Route all remaining power to forward weapons. If we're going to die, we're taking that flagship with us. Phantom's Edge accelerated, one damaged ship among thousands, heading towards certain destruction with its weapons armed and its crew ready. The two fleets closed on each other, and the final battle began. The hegemony opened fire first, a coordinated barrage from 6,000 ships. The void lit up with enough energy to sterilize a dozen planets. The human fleet, both military and civilian, scattered and dodged with desperate creativity, but there was nowhere to hide. Ships vanished in balls of plasma. Mining barges broke apart under particle beam fire. Transport ships, their improvised armor useless, died by the hundreds. And still the humans kept coming. Jack Morrison, the cargo hauler pilot who had armed his ship Lucky Star, flew through a storm of weapons fire with his family as his crew. His daughter operated the missile systems, his son managed power distribution, and his brother-in-law piloted the targeting computer. "Missiles away!" his daughter shouted. 6 improvised warheads streaked toward a hegemony cruiser. 3 were shot down by defensive fire. 2 missed. But 1 hit, punching through shields weakened by previous attacks and detonating against the hull. The cruiser didn't explode, but it listed to one side, leaking atmosphere. "We hit it!" Jack's son cheered. Then, a plasma beam from another enemy ship struck Lucky Star amidships. The ship broke in half. The family had maybe 3 seconds to realize what was happening before the air rushed out and the cold of space took them. They died together, still at their stations. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out thousands of times. Civilian ships died in droves, but they were causing damage. The hegemony had expected easy targets. Instead, they faced a swarm of gnats, each one carrying a sting. A mining laser here, a nuclear missile there, a deliberate collision somewhere else. Individually, the attacks were barely significant. Collectively, they were causing real damage to the hegemony fleet. High Commander Vex Thar watched with growing frustration as her ships reported damage from these primitive weapons. "How are they doing this?" she demanded. "These are unarmed civilians. They're using their ships as weapons, Commander," her tactical officer reported. "They're deliberately ramming our vessels, using mining equipment as makeshift weapons. They're adapting faster than we can respond." Vex Thar's mandibles clicked in anger. "Concentrate fire on the military vessels. Eliminate their command structure. Once their admirals are dead, the civilians will lose coordination." The order went out. The hegemony fleet focused its fire on the midnight Armada ships, trying to eliminate the professional military that was coordinating the defense. The human military vessels, already damaged and outnumbered, began dying even faster. Admiral Kovac felt her ship shudder as a near miss overloaded the shields. "Status report. Shields at 40% and falling, ma'am. We've lost half our weapon systems. Hull breaches on decks 5 and 6. Kovac looked at her tactical display. The Midnight Armada was down to less than 300 ships. The civilian fleet was being slaughtered. But they were also, incredibly, winning in one critical way. The hegemony fleet had lost over 500 ships, damaged or destroyed by weapons that cost almost nothing to produce, and were fired by people with minimal training. "Open a channel to Dr. Chen," Kovac ordered. Chen's face appeared, his office shaking from distant impacts. "I'm watching the battle, Sarah. We're losing." "I know," Kovac said. "But we're also winning. Look at the percentages. They've lost 8% of their fleet to our civilian volunteers. We're teaching the galaxy a lesson. You can't conquer a species that refuses to be conquered." Chen smiled sadly. "Lisa's ship is heading for their flagship. I've been watching her trajectory. She's on a collision course." Kovac checked her display and saw he was right. Phantom's Edge was burning toward the Pride of Dominion, ignoring all other targets, weapons firing constantly. "We should order her to break off." "We should," Chen agreed. "But we won't. Because she's doing what needs to be done." They watched together as Lisa's ship closed the distance. On Phantom's Edge, alarms screamed as hegemony defensive fire tore into the ship. Lisa gripped her command chair, watching the flagship grow larger on her view screen. They were close now. So close she could see individual weapons, batteries, and hull sections. "All remaining missiles, fire," she ordered. "And someone broadcast this message on all frequencies. Tell them Captain Lisa Chen sends her regards." The last of their missiles launched. Most were destroyed, but a few got through, exploding against the dreadnought's shields. The shields flickered, but held. "We're not going to penetrate their shields," her tactical officer said. Lisa had expected this. "Then we'll go through them the hard way. Engineering. Overload the reactor. Set it for maximum yield detonation. We've got maybe 2 minutes before it goes critical." "Ma'am, there's no escape pods left," someone said. "I know," Lisa replied. "Everyone. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. Tell our story well, in whatever comes after." She opened a private channel to her father. "Dad, if you're listening, I want you to know I'm not scared. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what needs to be done. I love you. I forgive you for all those missed birthdays and school plays. You were building this fleet, and because of that, Earth has a chance. I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be your daughter." The reactor reached critical mass. Phantom's Edge, traveling at tremendous speed, struck the Pride of Dominion's shields and exploded. The blast was unlike anything seen before in the battle. The reactor overload, combined with the ship's remaining munitions, created an explosion that briefly outshone the sun. The Pride of Dominion's shields collapsed entirely. The dreadnought's hull, exposed to the full force of the detonation, cracked and ruptured along a 100-meter section. On the bridge, High Commander Vex Thar was thrown to the deck as her ship shuddered. Emergency alarms wailed. Half her bridge crew was dead or injured. Reports flooded in. Massive hull breach. Shields offline. Main weapons damaged. Who was that? She demanded, pulling herself to her feet. What ship just hit us? A human strike carrier, Commander, someone reported. The Phantom's Edge. It was already heavily damaged. They deliberately rammed us with their reactor set to overload. Vexthar looked at the damage reports in stunned silence. One ship, one damaged ship flown by a crew that knew they were going to die, and they had crippled her flagship. She thought about the pilot's message. Send her regards. It was an act of defiance, so absolute that it demanded respect. She opened a channel to the Hegemony fleet. This is High Commander Vex Thar. All ships, fall back to defensive formation. Cease offensive operations. R. Her second officer stared at her in shock. Commander, the enemy is nearly defeated. We've destroyed most of their military vessels. Victory is within reach. Victory? Vexthar gestured at the tactical display. Look at what they've accomplished. They've destroyed or damaged 700 of our ships using cargo haulers and mining equipment. They've killed tens of thousands of our troops. And they're still fighting. Every ship we destroy costs us 3 more in the fighting. This isn't victory. This is mutual annihilation. She thought about the Krell Rebellion, about how the humans had inspired other species to resist. She thought about the resources the hegemony would need to completely exterminate humanity, and the message it would send to every other conquered species in the galaxy. Open a channel to the human admiral, Vexthar ordered. On UDS Defiance, Admiral Kovac blinked in surprise when the enemy flagship hailed her. She accepted the transmission, and High Commander Vex Thar's 4-armed form appeared on her screen. Human Admiral, Vex Thar said, her voice heavy with something that might have been respect. I am High Commander Vex Thar. I have a message for you and for your species. Kovac stood straight despite her injuries. I'm listening. The hegemony came to your world expecting easy conquest, Vexthar said. We have conquered 800 species using the same tactics. Show overwhelming force. Demand submission. Crush resistance. It has always worked before. She paused. But you are not like the others. You have fought with a ferocity that defies all logic. You have sacrificed civilians. You have inspired rebellion among our own forces. You have proven that the cost of conquering humanity would be catastrophic, even if we succeed. Kovac felt hope stirring. Are you offering terms? I am offering withdrawal. Vexthar said. The hegemony fleet will leave your system. In exchange, you will not pursue us. And you will deliver a message to your species for me. What message? Vexthar's expression was grim. Tell them that Earth has earned the right to exist unmolested, but only because you made conquest too expensive. Tell them that the galaxy is full of predators, and the hegemony is only one of many. Tell them to arm themselves, to become strong, because the next species that comes may not be willing to negotiate. She leaned forward. And tell them this. The hegemony will remember what happened here. We will tell other species about the humans who refuse to bow. Some will fear you for it. Others will seek to test themselves against you. You have bought your freedom with blood and sacrifice, but you have also painted a target on your world that will never fade. Kovac considered her words. Then she nodded. Those are acceptable terms. The human fleet will cease fire. You have 1 hour to begin your withdrawal from our system. Agreed, Vexthar said. Before I go, Admiral, I must ask. That ship that rammed my flagship, the one whose captain sent her regards. Who was she? Captain Lisa Chen, Kovac said quietly. She was 28 years old, the daughter of one of our leading scientists. She volunteered for a secret military program when she was 23 and spent the last 5 years of her life preparing to defend Earth. She was brave, skilled, and absolutely committed to protecting her home. Vexthar was silent for a moment. In my culture, we honor worthy enemies by remembering their names. I will remember Captain Lisa Chen. I will tell her story to my own commanders, so they understand what it means to face an enemy who fights for something greater than themselves. The transmission ended. Kovac immediately broadcast to all human forces. All ships, cease fire. The enemy is withdrawing. We've won. The cheering that erupted across the human fleet was deafening. But it was tinged with grief. Too many had died. Too much had been lost. But Earth was still free. Dr. Chen sat in his office, watching the hegemony fleet begin its retreat. Tears streamed down his face. His daughter was gone. The ship she had commanded was scattered atoms, drifting through space. But she had died protecting Earth. And because of her sacrifice, because of all their sacrifices, humanity would survive. Over the next week, the scale of the victory and the cost became clear. Humanity had lost 2,400 ships from the Midnight Armada and over 38,000 civilian vessels. The death toll was staggering. Over 2 million people had died in the battle, both military and civilian. Entire families had been wiped out. Colonies had lost their entire defense forces. The orbital infrastructure around Earth was in ruins, but they had survived. The hegemony had retreated, bloodied and shocked. And more importantly, the news of Earth's defiance spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had lived under hegemony rule for centuries began to whisper about rebellion. The myth of hegemony invincibility was shattered. 10 years later, Admiral Sarah Kovac stood in front of a memorial wall on Earth. The wall stretched for kilometers, covered with names. Every person who had died defending Earth was listed there, military and civilian alike. The Midnight Armada crews, who had lived in secret for 20 years, were finally acknowledged publicly. Their families finally knew what had happened to them. Kovac found Lisa Chen's name among the thousands. She placed a hand on the engraved metal and whispered, "Thank you." A voice spoke behind her. "Admiral Kovac?" She turned to see a young man, perhaps 20 years old, wearing a military cadet uniform. "Yes, I'm Marcus Webb. My father was Commander Robert Okafor. He commanded the destroyer Shadow's Fist. He died, ramming a hegemony battlecruiser." Kovac remembered the name. "Your father was a hero. He saved thousands of lives with his sacrifice." "I know," Marcus said. "I wanted you to know that I've joined the military. A lot of us have. The children of the Midnight Volunteers. We're training to defend Earth, because we know the hegemony wasn't the only threat out there." Kovac smiled. "Your father would be proud." She looked up at the sky. It was night, and the stars were visible above Earth's recovering atmosphere. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was licking its wounds and telling stories about the species that had refused to bow. Somewhere out there, other species were building weapons and planning attacks. The galaxy was dangerous, just as the Proximans had warned, but Earth was ready now. Humanity had tasted battle and learned that they could win. The secret fleets had become public. Humanity was building faster than light ships based on captured hegemony technology. They were establishing alliances with other species who had been inspired by their resistance. The night sky still glowed faintly red in some places, where debris from the battle continued to burn as it fell through the atmosphere. A child walking with her mother pointed at the glow. "Mommy, what's that red light?" the child asked. The mother knelt down beside her daughter. "That's the price of freedom, sweetie. It's a reminder that we're free because brave people were willing to fight for us. And it's a promise that we'll never let anyone take that freedom away." The child looked up at the red glow, not fully understanding but sensing its importance. "Will we always be free?" The mother smiled and stood, taking her daughter's hand. "As long as there are people willing to fight for it. Yes. As long as we remember what it cost and what it's worth. Earth bows to no one, and it never will." They walked away from the memorial, leaving Admiral Kovac alone with her thoughts and the names of the honored dead. Above her, the sky burned softly red, a permanent reminder of the day humanity refused to surrender and won their place among the stars.